So last night we talked about a sort of worryingly long list of actions the new administration has taken that just happen to benefit the president's top campaign donor. Everything from cutting the competition for Elon Musk's EV charging stations to firing investigators who were looking into his refusal to reveal his contacts with foreign governments. Well, today, the New York Times is out with new reporting that makes that list a whole lot longer and may help explain even more of some of the inexplicable firings and shutdowns that the administration seems to have prioritized in these first 3 weeks that they've been in power. For instance, we've talked here on the show about how Trump has hamstrung agencies that deal with workers' rights, including the National Labor Relations Board and the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. Why did he go after those agencies? Well, he fired top officials at those agencies and didn't replace them. That makes it impossible for those agencies to do their job. Why did he do that? Why do we understand why that got a priority action from this administration? Well, I don't know. But the Times reports today that those agencies are handling 24 workers' rights investigations and at least one big lawsuit alleging racial harassment at Elon Musk's companies. In similar fashion, Trump has also fired FEC Commissioner Ellen Weintraub, Federal Elections Commission. That effectively shuts down the FEC, which polices campaign finance violations. It may be helpful to know that that's the same FEC that was overseeing complaints from this last election about Elon Musk giving people $1 million checks to, quote, encourage voter registration. A lottery that he held, even though it is illegal to pay people to register to vote. Last week, we brought you the story of Phyllis Fong, the Inspector General for the Department of Agriculture. She was fired by Donald Trump. You might remember her story. After she was fired, nevertheless showed up to work the next day anyway, saying my firing was illegal and so I'm going to work. They marched her out of the office, apparently. Well, it turns out in 2022, Phyllis Fong, quote, opened an investigation into Elon Musk's brain implant startup company, Neuralink, stemming from allegations that Musk's company had, quote, mistreated dozens of test monkeys. Mistreatment that Elon Musk himself denies. Why was it so important to fire the Inspector General of USDA as one of your first actions? Well, I don't know, but that's what she was doing to bother Elon Musk. Trump has also fired the head of the Office of Government Ethics. That is the agency tasked with investigating right now whether or not the Doge project is itself a conflict of interest for Elon Musk. Again, we don't know what is motivating or setting the priority list for this new administration in its first 3 weeks, but there is a lot of overlap between the administration has done and what you might imagine is a wish list for the president's top campaign donor, who's been allowed to essentially have his way with the federal government, including a lot of elements of the federal government that were complicating his business life or cramping his style. Joining us now is Eric Lipton, investigative reporter at the New York Times, lead byline on that investigation into Elon Musk's companies and their interactions with these agencies that have been hamstrung and attacked by the administration. Mr. Lipton, I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I spotlighted some of the things that you reported today in the Times. Let me ask if I misconstrued any of those or if there are any other examples that you turned up that you feel like our audience should know about.
What we did was we sort of examined the breadth of Elon Musk operations across the federal government. And there are so many pending investigations, lawsuits, inquiries, and we looked at how many of them had been disrupted, and we were quite surprised at how many cases we saw where, we don't know, we never saw any evidence of Musk explicitly reaching in and, using his clout or powers to stop any particular investigation. But what we saw was that again and again, agencies that are targeting his companies have now had significant disruptions. The inspector generals, the quorums are gone. They can't therefore process any potential new lawsuits or settlements. And it just shows you how never before have we had a situation where someone has basically $13 billion worth of federal contracts over the last 5 years, $3.8 billion just in 2024. and at the same time has, dozens of ongoing investigations, that same person would be given such incredible clout over the federal government. And that is a conflict of interest. And now we're seeing the implications of that, where there are more than dozens of investigations that have been potentially disrupted because of the broad disruption that's happening in the federal government. And that's something that we really felt we needed to drill down on and understand and identify as many cases as possible where these disruptions have occurred. And that's what we published in today's paper.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I'm just sort of cheerleading for your reporting here, but the examples that you found and that you document are really blunt. I mean, you say that you didn't find examples of him reaching in and directing the end of an investigation, but take, for example, him wanting to expand Twitter or X so that it also involves a payment system. That is something that would be regulated by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, by the CFPB. He announces that, or CFPB. He announces that a few weeks ago, then gets handed control of a big portion of the U.S. government and then announces CFPB RIP. In effect, claiming credit for personally killing that agency, which takes the agency off the board as a potential regulator for this thing he has just announced he wants to do with his business. I mean, I know that I know that there's a lot of acronyms here, and I know that financial conflicts of interest sound like a sort of esoteric thing, but this is like a cartoon Western level of cartoon Western explication in terms of the simplicity of how much his actions here have benefited his own business interests. I just feel like it's very, very, very clear.
Yeah, I've been a reporter for 3 decades, more than 3 decades. I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen such a blatant conflict of interest. He is one of the largest contractors for the federal government. Again, $15 billion in contracts just in the last decade. And the notion that an individual who could be, in running or founding or operating, so many companies that have so many contracts with the federal government, and at the same time, deciding what the budgets of the federal agency should be or what regulatory powers they should have, and even, what investigative and enforcement powers they should have. And I mean, the thing is that even before the election, Musk was very clear that he had intense frustration with the Federal Aviation Administration, with the Securities and Exchange Commission. He wanted the FAA administrator fired. He called the SEC political. And he was very pointed in the Department of Interior. He was very frustrated with. He blamed all of these agencies for, we're never going to get, humans to Mars at this pace. And it was very clear that he wanted to have, the ability to clash with these regulators and to rein them in. And now he has that power. And now these same agencies are having their powers curtailed. Now, again, we don't have evidence that he has directly reached in, but there is a correlation that needed to be called out, and we've now called it out.
Eric Lipton, investigative reporter for the New York Times. Thank you for your reporting on this. Thanks for your clarity and for making time tonight to help us understand it, Eric. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It really is like, if you were a bank robber and you also had the power to zero out the budget of the police department that was otherwise going to arrest you for robbing the bank. That's what this is. It's not complicated. This is our life.
From explosive new accusations against Donald Trump's pick to lead the FBI, to the push to dismiss a rather open and shut bribery case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams, to comments Donald Trump just made in the Oval Office blasting federal judges who have ruled against his administration. The MAGA movement's efforts to obliterate the rule of law in America are coming into fuller view today. We begin with the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee suggesting that Kash Patel might have lied under oath to Congress and is secretly plotting a purge of career civil servants at the FBI. In a letter to the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Senator Dick Durbin says that Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove told attendees of a January 29th meeting between top FBI brass and leadership at the Justice Department this, quote, he received multiple calls from Stephen Miller the night before. Mr. Miller was pressuring him because Mr. Patel wanted the FBI to remove targeted employees faster. as DOJ had already done with prosecutors. Now, according to Senator Durbin, notes from that meeting read, quote, KP, Kash Patel, wants movement at FBI, reciprocal actions for DOJ. Durbin adding this, quote, it is unacceptable for a nominee with no current role in government, much less at the FBI, to personally direct unjustified and potentially illegal adverse employment actions against senior career FBI leadership and other dedicated nonpartisan law enforcement officers. If these allegations are true, Patel may have perjured himself before the Senate Judiciary Committee. For reference, here is what Kash Patel said about this at his confirmation hearing.
Are you aware of any plans or discussions to punish in any way, including termination, FBI agents or personnel associated with Trump investigations? Yes or no?
I'm not aware of that,
Thank you.
Senator.
There is no evidence of wrongdoing by FBI employees involved in these investigations. If you do pursue investigations of those involved, will you commit to using standard processes, including a standard review by the FBI Inspections Division and the Inspector General?
Senator, I will honor all those review processes.
You will honor those review processes.
Yes, Senator.
If these are actions that the FBI employees, if there are actions against FBI employees that do not follow those standards process that happen before you get in, will you commit to reversing any decision prior to your arrival so that those standard processes and the standard review by the FBI Inspections Division will take place?
I don't know what's going on right now over there, but I'm committed to you, Senator, and your colleagues that I will honor the internal review process of the FBI.
I don't know anything. I don't know what they're doing over there. Wasn't really even believable at the moment, was it? We should note that NBC News has not independently verified the allegations being made by Senator Durbin, but he will join us later in the program to discuss his findings and his allegations. A spokesperson for Kash Patel dismissed the claims as, quote, anonymous sources and, quote, secondhand gossip, adding, quote, the Senate should confirm him without delay. We'll add an exclamation point for them. The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to vote on Kash Patel's nomination Thursday, less than 2 days from right now, meaning that the allegations come at a possibly critical time for the FBI and, more broadly, the justice system in this country. Trump allies are working to remake the Justice Department and the FBI with a particular focus on those who investigated the January 6th insurrection and defendants, with one priority in mind: some categories of people defined by their proximity to and affinity for Donald Trump cannot be touched or imprisoned or prosecuted. And if the justice system doesn't hold them accountable, why should you care? What does that mean for you? That's a question Democrats need to answer, and quickly. Allegations that Trump's pick to run the FBI is leading a purge of the agency he seeks to lead, and the questions it raises about the rule of law in America is where we start today. New York Times Justice Department reporter Glenn Thrush is here. Joining me at the table, MSNBC legal analyst, former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief Christy Greenberg's back, plus former Assistant U.S. Attorney and former New York City mayoral candidate Maya Wiley's here. Glenn Thrush, start for me with the why. I think that for our audience, it's norm busting on top of potential illegal action, on top of norm busting and turning DOJ and the FBI into a tool for Trump's political police. And it can start to feel like a blur. But this is significant. It feels like in the same way Mike Flynn lied about his call with Kislyak was. If Kash Patel's going to take over the FBI and the Republicans are all going to confirm him unanimously, he can do whatever he wants once he gets there. Why would he lie in his confirmation hearing?
Well, we also have not verified independently what was in the Durbin claim, but we've reported around the edges. And I can tell you there are a couple of things in that certainly comport with what we have reported. First and foremost is that Stephen Miller is in the middle of all of this. Miller has been, as we reported, I think over the weekend in an Emil Bove profile that I wrote with a couple of colleagues, Miller, was in the middle of a lot of these orders, particularly on Homeland Security, that are coming out of the Justice Department. I spoke with a a Justice Department employee a couple of days ago who said that Miller is on the phone with people over at the department multiple times per day. Whether or not that involved an interaction with Patel, the Inspector General will find out, or we'll be able to develop some reporting on that. But in any event, it's just very, very clear that what is going on at the FBI and the Justice Department has the endorsement and the enthusiastic support of the President of the United States and the most powerful people around him. It emanates from Trump. The people in these jobs are executing the will of the man in charge, period, full stop. And Emil Bove is a name people really ought to start paying attention to. This has been the prime mover behind almost everything that has happened, including the FBI stuff, the threats to local officials for, with criminal investigations for obstructing immigration enforcement, down to the firing of 20 prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. who worked on the Capitol riot cases. And one last thing, it just seems that we have moved from what we might have expected during the transition, that Trump and company would go after Jack Smith and the individuals involved in his 2 prosecutions, while some of what he does is being litigated in court and may not have been legal in terms of personnel moves. I think it was widely expected that people who were involved in those investigations were going to see some impact. I think the thing that has really been most stunning is that he has extended all of these actions to encompass the January 6th defendants and also ancillary political figures who were investigated sufficiently to warrant an indictment. So Trump is moving ahead, not just on cases that involved him directly, but this whole universe of criminality and alleged criminality of people who were allied to him or charged with things similar to what he was charged with.
Glenn Thrush, really important question about all of that, really important reporting. Is it Bove or Bove? I've heard both in the last hour.
I have heard, here's what I'll tell you, Emil.
Okay.
Emil.
Okay. Emil. Not Emil. It's Emil. Okay. Let me ask you 2 questions. I mean, here's what the Democrats, I think, so far have failed to articulate, and the Republicans, I should say, should, but they clearly don't care. They're in on this, enthusiastic about it, and I think they've made that clear with how they've acted as all these characters and all these EOs have come across the transom, and they've had nary a concern or a whimper or a whine. What I want to understand is, are they offering any reassurances that a woman-owned business or minority-owned business or a business with an LGBTQ plus flag outside would be protected if it were burned to the ground? I mean, what is interesting is that they are destroying the FBI as it's existed for a generation. And other than your reporting and Senator Durbin and a handful of others, it's a rather muted response.
It is remarkable that this isn't getting as much attention. I think what is going on now is really remarkable. I don't want to use the term unprecedented. I've banned that from my life, but we are seeing movement here that we haven't. And the J. Edgar Hoover period, 48 years at the FBI, was no walk in the park. There were tremendous abuses, and the Republicans have made accusations, as did Hillary Clinton, about the way that the FBI handled those investigations. Totally legitimate. But it is really beyond comprehension and was not part of the political campaign or anything Trump said during the political campaign that would indicate that you're going to send out a questionnaire to 5,000 or 6,000 agents, asking them essentially whether or not they worked on J6 cases. These were righteous cases in terms of the jury results. I mean, people were convicted. Even the obstruction charge, which was nullified by the Supreme Court, represented a relative minority of the charges that these Capitol rioters were accused of before they were pardoned by the president. We are really going into territory, Nicole, that we have never been in before.
There are actually 2 sides to how Musk used Twitter, now X, that are relevant right now. One is the obvious total failure from a business perspective. He's supposed to be a business guy. He got a lot of money from banks on the principle and the expectations he would be good at business, but he lost a ton of money.
X is worth 71.5% less than it was at the time that Elon Musk bought it.
The social media platform is still seeing a negative cash flow because of a 50% drop in ad revenue.
Numbers don't lie. That crash was the brutal economic reality. So Musk lost the company a lot of money. Ultimately, there are debts to pay even when you're that rich. So his partners, his business loans, whatever collateral he puts up on that, he is way down. But in terms of raw attention, it was a different story. Musk used X to make himself far more interesting and relevant and controversial. He won the attention war in 2024, as Axios put it. And the site under his management, while it lost all that money, remember, which all of his banker investors are mad about, also got 30 times the daily traffic than many rivals. Now, our colleague Chris Hayes has his eye on exactly this battle to control attention. And if you've noticed it from the tech inaugural to the way tech has been a central feature of our politics, Hayes argues it's the defining battle right now. Younger people, sometimes called Gen Z, are all over social media. Many stay up late just to check their feeds. And it goes beyond just your friends or youthful things. This type of internet, always online, always something new, and digital attention merchants using a business model to make young people and everyone else continue to feel that way. This is affecting not only how we live and how people are raised and how we communicate with each other. It's become a kind of a baseline of our life and politics. It's not a coincidence that this election cycle, if you noticed, had a heck of a lot more tech during the campaign and all the way up to the inauguration and all those tech billionaires. And this sort of constant internet life is something that not only Hayes diagnoses in this smart new book, I finished it, but it's also something comic Bo Burnham explored in a streaming Netflix special, Inside.
Welcome to the internet. What would you prefer? Would you like to fight for civil rights or tweet a racial slur? Be happy, be bursting with rage. We got a million different ways to engage. Could I interest you in everything all of the time? A little bit of everything all of the time.
Who are you going to call Chris Hayes? MSNBC host of All In with the new best-selling book, The Sirens Call, How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource. It debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which is a big deal. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I can say I finished the whole book.
You read it.
You know that.
You were one of the first readers. I got you a galley and you read it right away.
So as they say, I have questions, you know that term, but before them, tell us what's important about your book right now for viewers.
Well, I think people right now, over the last few weeks, have been struggling with how to stay focused and how to deal with the onslaught of pulls on their attention from the news. And we've ended up in a scenario where the kind of private life experience of these constant siren calls, these constant compelled forms of attention on us with the buzz of the phone and the incoming, is now being mirrored in public discourse between Trump and Musk, who are doing the exact same thing at the macro level. And in the case of Musk, with the platform that he bought, it's like the Venn diagram of both of them. And the whole book is about the fact that attention is the defining resource of our time, that it's finite, that it's powerful, and that there is an incredibly sophisticated world of attention capitalism built to extract it from us, often essentially against our will.
So briefly, and then I want to play something. Does attention capitalism's success, which we see in what the most valuable companies are in the world, it's inarguable, require politics to be this way? Because that operates in many countries.
Well, I think we've seen much of what's happening in our country mirrored in other places. I mean, the kind of discourse that attention capitalism platforms select for is a discourse that is maximally attentionally salient and has no other value it's pursuing other than that.
Right.
The platform only exists for one purpose: to maximize the number and hours of eyeballs on the site so as to monetize it with selling ads against it.
Right. And
There is nothing else it's trying to do that you and I are trying to do, or that, you know, people who are making a movie are trying to do, right? Tell a story, get a message out, inform people. The pureness of that distillation of it selects for lots of stuff, lies, conspiracy theories that can be really, really toxic in aggregate.
Yeah, and your book does a very precise job with the political context that I think people will find interesting of showing how that is baked in.
Yeah.
So if that's completely baked into most of those tools, there's no way to protest it within those tools, right? It's like a Black Mirror episode. I want to show how this evolved over time.
Yeah.
You write in the book about how politicians used to speak, how some things in the world have gotten better and others have gotten worse. And so in that spirit, we are about to show a lengthier history lesson that fits with your book that we think is interesting, but starts with, the first part is the slowest, how politicians used to speak to the country on a national basis, and then out from there. Let's take a look.
All right. We discussed tonight domestic issues, but I would not want that to be any implication to be given that this does not involve directly our struggle with Mr. Khrushchev for survival. Mr. Khrushchev is in New York, and he maintains the communist offensive throughout the world because of the productive power of the Soviet Union itself.
The things that Senator Kennedy has said, many of us can agree with. There is no question but that we cannot discuss our internal affairs in the United States without recognizing that they have a tremendous bearing on our international position. There is no question but that this nation cannot stand still.
Taxes have been cut, and yet income is up to the federal government by 25% in the last 3 years. And so what I want to do is keep this expansion going.
You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military's changed.
You defrauded the challenged on a point. He's defrauded.
You can't be for the mob on January 6th and for the officers. You can't. And it's not funny. When that mob came, Senator Cruz was hiding in a supply closet.
So one of the things I think you see there, and I write in the book about the Lincoln-Douglas debates, a debate is what I call in the book an attentional regime. And this is really an important concept because all human endeavors, this interview we're having right now, your first day in preschool, the floor of the United States Senate, a business meeting with an agenda, have some attentional regime to guide the flow of attention.
Right.
A debate is an attentional regime created for the purpose of civic public life. And one of the things we've seen down is a total breakdown of these debates. I mean, when you get to the cross-shouting of Donald Trump and Lil Marco, or when you think about Donald Trump doing a debate, he doesn't actually debate. Like, compare Nixon and Kennedy to the way that Trump conducts himself. He basically yells over everyone. He interrupts. He avoids the topic. That is endemic now to our politics, this breakdown of attentional regimes, which then means that the most important thing is just to get attention and put attention on what you want, as opposed to genuinely engage with the other person.
Here's something I couldn't tell from reading your book, but I get to ask you. You know, sometimes you finish the book and you have a question, but you don't have the author. Does this problem happen basically this way without phones? Meaning you have laptops, we have a shortening of political discourse we just saw, even pre-phone. Does it happen without the computer going in your pocket and your kids' pockets?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I think the platforms are a little more important than the phones. Like the scale of the platform, the fact that it's so hyper-individuated, the fact that it has an algorithmic machine learning model being run over billions of users that's only selecting to maximize attention is the issue more than it's in your phone. But the phone, of course, is what gives it the ubiquity that means people spend 5 to 6 hours a day on it. You know, so, and that is increasingly one of the things that happen is whatever dividing line there used to be between journalism as content and other stuff,
forget it.
Completely gone.
Well, and
right? Like, we are doing something, we're trying to keep people looking, like we need to get people's attention, but we really are trying to do a different thing.
Yes, and you're
than what the algorithm is.
And in your conclusion of the book, you wrestle with this idea that in the old days, raising awareness and attention was something that was seen as a positive, like attention on this issue, this famine abroad.
Famine in Ethiopia, right? We are the world.
But implied in that was a certain quality of attention.
Yes.
Not just saying, oh, something funny or outrageous happened, let me look at it for those 8 seconds and then leave the fam.
Yes.
Right? We have one lyric for your book, okay?
Oh, good. I was hoping we were.
Jadakiss, right?
Obviously.
In the famous song Why, which asks all these questions, at one point he says, y'all let the Terminator win the election. Come on, pay attention.
That's very good.
And I think he means
yes.
That outcome is silly. You let an actor, man, imagine if he got to Trump, but this was a pre-Trump song. You let an actor take over the California governor's race, etc. And so he's saying, like you would say, pay better attention.
And pay attention to, you know, Walter Lippmann has this line in The Phantom Public he writes in the 1920s. He's covering the Treaty of Versailles. And he knows that Americans are not paying that much attention to it. And he says the American public have a great interest in what happens in Versailles, but they're not interested in it.
Love that.
Bars from Lippmann.
Bars.
And that point that's replicable. That was true back then. But this gap between what's interesting and what we have an interest in, between what grabs our attention and what we should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
The thing that you and I work very hard every day to kind of bring those close together, that in the gap is where I think democracy's in a lot of trouble right now.
Joining us now is Mark Zaid, founding legal partner of the organization Whistleblower Aid. Mark, good to have you here. We are hearing the phrase constitutional crisis already less than a month into this presidency. The dean of the law school at UC Berkeley telling the New York Times there have been so many unconstitutional and illegal actions in the first 18 days of the Trump presidency. We've never seen anything like this. Mark, other administrations have clashed with courts before. So how do you see it? Is this a constitutional crisis, or is it just heightened friction between these two branches?
I mean, constitutional crisis may be a little bit over the top, but I think what we're seeing is we're on the verge of getting there. I've been saying to so many people that we're not even close to how bad it's going to be. It is going to get far, far worse. Like, I've been litigating against Trump and his allies for almost a decade now. And the strategy that they are playing, as you just talked about in your first panel, with an appeal of an administrative stay by a judge, which is a docket entry control mechanism that they have as they're hearing motions. They are playing out what they've done in the civil cases we've been litigating, particularly defamation, of lawfare that they, the MAGA crowd, have been pushing towards those who criticize them. And their strategy is they appeal everything.
Yep.
They file every possible motion they can, whether it is borderline frivolous or at times frivolous. They've been sanctioned many times over the course of the last few years. So what we're going to get, and what I'm most fearful of, and it's already being discussed publicly by many people, is when will that decision be by a federal judge that the president of the United States just says, you and what army is going to enforce that? That then will be the real constitutional crisis.
Lisa Rubin just talked about how this could move quickly to the Supreme Court. In his year-end report just a few months ago, Chief Justice John Roberts had a warning, writing, for the past several decades, the decisions of the courts, popular or not, have been followed. And the nation has avoided the standoffs that plagued the 1950s and the 1960s. Within the past few years, however, elected officials from across the political spectrum have raised the specter of open disregard for federal court rulings. Mark, where do you see this Supreme Court landing on the issue of Trump and executive overreach as these lawsuits litigate all the way up?
Well, certainly what we saw in the last half of the Biden administration was that the Supreme Court was in no rush to address these issues, right? What saved Donald Trump were all the delays in the legal proceedings, including up at the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court can act very quickly. You know, people don't remember, 50 plus years ago in the Pentagon Papers litigation, the Supreme Court, from the district court to the Supreme Court and a ruling, was literally in less than 3 weeks from start to finish. Now, if the Supreme Court takes these cases up quickly now, that would be inconsistent with what we had seen, although in many ways that's a good thing. John Roberts is probably going to be pivotal on this because of what the quote you just read. But the immunity decision, of course, is going to come back to haunt them because President Trump has effectively been given, an opportunity to do whatever he wants without at least criminal penalty for official acts. So it may be that the Supreme Court or any judge is going to have to start holding in contempt or sanctioning lower level officials beneath the president who might not fall within that immunity ruling. Again, starting to bring us into what would be a constitutional crisis of one branch pitted against the other in a real war, not just a disagreement war.
I mean, this could be a huge test for our democratic system. Before Trump's inauguration, I mean, you saw this coming. You were advising clients who were potential targets to leave the country. You've already faced some retaliation in the form of your security clearance being revoked. Do you think more retribution could be on the way?
I have no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. And, the Adams case shows what the flip side is. Trump doesn't look backwards too much. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of retribution going on, but understand also it's the people around him that are pushing much of this. Nobody pays attention to sort of the man behind the curtain. It's not just Trump. There's so many people who have grudges against those of us who have been just fighting for the rule of law. But if you kiss his ring, if you do something that he likes, which whatever is going on with Adams, then he will change his tune pretty quickly. Now, I have no expectation, anticipation. I have no plan to do that. I'm going to continue to do what I do every year since the Clinton administration, and that's hold a president and his administration accountable for illegal and unethical violations. I'm not talking about policy disputes. That's for everybody else to deal with. I deal with the legal issues. And we are not done seeing what retaliation we're going to face. The concerns that I was raising before inauguration, some of them haven't manifested themselves yet. No one's been arrested or thrown into jail. And just wait for that, because I dare say that that's coming.
That is a scary thought. Mark Zaid, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your insights and your perspective on all of this.